Hey guys, so today we are going to go over some basic array methods and properties, and we're going to do this all in the console in a browser. So you can open up a new tab, and if you just click inspect, you can get to the dev panel, and you can click on console, and you can clear it out if there's anything there, and you can follow along here. So the first thing we're going to do is create an array, and the simplest way to do this is by creating a variable, and then in square brackets you put the items that you want to have inside of your array. So here I'm creating an array called lunch, and I could even just leave it like this and have it empty, or I can straight away put items in there. So I'll put some strings some strings into my array. We'll have an apple, a sandwich, and a granola bar. And if we look at lunch dot length, we get to see the number of items that are in there. So there's 1, 2, 3 items in there. And if we wanted to grab the first item, we can just do lunch and then in square brackets the index of the item that we want to grab. So JavaScript is 0 index based, which means the first item is actually at index 0. So we can see index 0 here gets us the apple. If we do the same, and I'm just going to press up on my keyboard to repeat the last command. I'm going to delete this and do 1. We can see sandwiches at index 1, so 0, 1, and then this would be 2. So 2. If you want to add to an array, there's a few different options for doing it. You could try to add an item at the beginning, or at the end of the array rather, or you can try to put it near the beginning of the array. So the first method we're going to look at is push. And the push method allows us to add an item to the end of the array. So we're going to do lunch.push, and we'll put some carrots in our lunch. And what it returns is the new length of the array. So we've got 4 back here. So if we do lunch dot length, we'll see it's 4. In practice, you'll rarely ever use this. If you wanted to grab the length, you would just reference lunch.length or your array.length. You wouldn't usually use the output of push, so that this result rarely gets stored to a variable. And if we look at lunch now, if we just print it out here, we see apple, sandwich, granola bar, and carrots. So that got added to the end of the array. And you can also add items to the beginning of the array by using the unshift method. So unshift, it takes in 1 or more items to add to the beginning of the array. So at the beginning of the array here, we can add, in the parentheses here, we can add what we want to add to the beginning of the array. So we'll in here add a banana, and this also returns the length. Likewise, rarely do you ever use that. So we'll take a look at lunch. We can see banana got put at the beginning, apple, sandwich, granola bar, carrots. You can also use this, both push and unshift, to add multiple items at the same time. So if you wanted to add a few more items to the end of the array, you can just keep adding them in here with commas. So we can just say 1 more item, 1 more item. So you can see I have 3 items added in here, separated by commas, and I hit enter. There's our new length, 8. And if we look at lunch, we can see it's the same as it was before up to here, and then the 3 items that we added. And similarly for unshift, we can add in multiple things at once. So add, at, beginning. We'll say start. Add at start. So we added 3 more, a new length of 11. And if we look at the lunch, we see these 3 are added in, and then the rest of these are the same as this. So there's a dot, dot, dot there. It didn't fit in the last item in there, but if we click on it here, we'll see it gets expanded out. It's exactly the same, minus or with these 3 that we've added on there. So those are the 2 methods that you can use for adding to an array. Push, your array push method adds them to the end of the array, and unshift adds them to the beginning of the array. And another common thing that you want to do with arrays is to remove items from the array. So there's similarly 2 different methods for doing this. One for removing items from the end of the array, and one for removing items from the beginning of the array. And the method for removing from the end of the array is called pop. So we can do lunch.pop, and it's a function that you can call like this, and it actually returns the last item from the array. So here we saw item was the last item of the array previously. It returned it, and this you almost always will want to save to some variable. So we'll take a look at that again one more time here. But if we look at lunch right now, we see now it has a length of 10. It was 11 previously, and item is no longer in there. So we can create another variable. We'll say, we'll name it current item. And it will be equal to lunch.pop. So we're going to pop off the last one there. So if we take a look at current item, we see it's the string more. So that was the last item there. And if we look at lunch, we see now it has a length of 9 as opposed to 10 before, and the string more is removed. So pop, it does not take any arguments, and it removes the last item from the array and returns it. Another method for doing this is the shift method. So we can do, and we'll assign it to our variable current item is equal to lunch.shift. So shift, it removes the first item from the array. So we can see here current item, got the value add. We can take a look at that. Current item is add. And if we look at lunch, now it has an array, a length of 8, and it has that first item removed. So shift removes the first item from the array and returns it. So shift and unshift, they both work with the beginning of the array. Unshift, it adds an item to the array, and shift removes an item from the array. And then push and pop, they work with the end of the array. Push, it adds another item on, or multiple items, and pop removes the last item. And another common use case is to want to add and remove at the same time to an array. So I'm going to refresh my browser here to get rid of all the stuff that we've done here, and we're going to take a look at the array splice method, which allows us to do both adding and removing in one operation. So I have a simple array here, which is called days, and it has 7 days of the week. So we'll save that, hit enter. And if we wanted to remove some elements from the array, we can call the splice method with just one argument. So we're going to create a new variable. We're going to say const days removed, and it's going to be equal to days. That's our array that we created up here. Array days dot splice, And the first argument we can pass in here is just the index from where to start removing. So if we take a look at days removed, we can see it started at Tuesday and removed through the end here. So it started at index 2. So 0, if we take a look at this one, Sunday is at 0, Monday is at 1, Tuesday is at 2. So because we never specified where to stop, it started at 2 and removed everything. So days removed is this subset of the array. And if we take a look at days, we see just Monday, Sunday, and Monday are left. And we will refresh here so we can have our array again in all of its entirety. You can also remove from the end. So if we did days, we can do const days removed, and we're gonna do days dot splice again, and this time instead of doing 2, we're gonna do -3. And what this will do is it's going to remove the last 3 elements and return them in an array for us. So if we take a look at days removed, we have the last 3 days: Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday. And if we look at days, we can see it's everything that was before that. And if we only wanted to remove a certain number of elements, there is a second argument we can pass in to the days or the splice method, and that is the number of elements to remove. So I'm going to refresh again here and paste in my days array, and we're going to do again create const days removed. We're going to do days dot splice, and we're going to start at index 3, and we're going to remove just one element this time. So when we don't include the second argument, it starts at this index and removes all the way down. So 0, 1, 2, 3. It would have started at Wednesday and removed everything afterwards, but we're just going to remove 1. So it'll remove Wednesday and keep everything else. So we'll hit enter here. If we look at days removed, we see it's just Wednesday. And if we look at days, it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was removed, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So the second argument to the splice method is the number of elements to remove. And what you can also do is add in a third argument, which is the elements you want to add to your array. So we'll refresh this here again, post in days to make sure we have the entire days of the week. And again, we'll do const days removed is equal to days dot splice, and we're going to start at index 3, and this time we can even do 0. Well, we're not going to remove any elements. And afterwards, the third argument and everything afterwards is the items that you want to add to your array. So this is going to be at index 3, which is 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to add it right before index 3, right before Wednesday. So we can say over here Tuesday and a half, and straight away we'll add in Tuesday and 3/4. If you need more time during your week, you just simply add more days. So now if we look at days removed, it's an empty array because we passed in 0, we deleted 0 items. So splice always returns an array even if you do 0. So we just have an empty array. And if we look at days, we now have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then right before Wednesday, that was our original index 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Right before Wednesday, we added in these 2 more strings, Tuesday and a half, Tuesday and 3/4. So that's what we see here. So splice can be used to both add and remove items from your array, and you get a lot more control over it regarding where precisely you want to add and remove. So what we can do here now is we can try to undo what we did with this days removed, where we started at index 3, removed 0 items and added 2. To undo those, we can do days.splice. So this time I'm not saving it to a variable because I don't care for the value. I just want to remove from very precise indexes. So we're going to start removing at index 3. We're going to remove 2 items. So that's Tuesday 1.5 and Tuesday and 3/4. And just so we can see it, I actually will save it to an array. So we're going to say const removed Tuesdays is equal to. Now if we take a look at our days again, we have 7 days in the week: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we can look at our removed Tuesdays, and we can see there are the 2 that we have added. So another important method for learning how to work with arrays is how to copy arrays. So everything that we've been doing thus far, the push, the unshift, the pop, the shift, and the splice, we have been modifying our existing array. Anytime we did one of these operations, when we looked at our original array, whether it was days or lunch at the beginning, it was being modified. And oftentimes this can lead to confusing or unexpected behavior in your application when you have the same array being passed around, and different parts of your application could be adding to it or removing from it, and other parts aren't expecting those changes. So a common practice to do is to actually create a copy of your array. So if you have a function, you copy the array that you got and you work with your copy and you leave the original untouched. And the simplest way to do this is to use the spread operator. So we're going to restart here, refresh. So the easiest and most common way to make a copy of an array is to use the spread operator. So we're going to create our initial array that we're going to make a copy of. We will call it again lunch, and we're going to put in right away here an apple, a sandwich, a carrot, and a cookie. So here's our lunch array. Oh, so I got this syntax error, redeclaration of a const lunch. I already declared lunch over here. So what I'll do is just copy this, and I'll refresh. And now I should be able to paste it back in, and it works. So the simplest way to make a copy is using the spread operator. So we're going to create a new variable called mylunch. And what we will do is the three dots here are called the spread operator, and then the array that we want to copy. So lunch. And now if we look at my lunch, we can see that it has 4 items as well. If we remove an item from my lunch, we'll get that item here. We look at my lunch, we have 3 items left here. And if we look at the original lunch, it still has all 4. So that's the simplest and most common way to create copies of an array. Another less common but also not rare way to make a copy of an array is to use the slice method. So we're going to create your lunch, and we're going to copy the original lunch using the slice method. So if you don't pass in any arguments, it will copy the entire array. So we can look at your lunch. It has all 4 items. If we add something to your lunch, it's not going to modify the original array. So we can push another cookie on there. We can look at your lunch. It has 5 now. The original lunch has 4, and my lunch will still have 3. So these can all be independent of one another. If these were inside of functions, you could mutate the array. So mutate is another word for modify. You'd be able to modify or mutate your array without affecting the other ones. And slice, you can pass in some arguments. So from what index you want to start copying. So if we wanted to create his lunch, we'd do lunch.slice, and then we could say here to start at index 2. So remember, it's 0 based. So skip 0, skip 1, and start at 2. And similar to splice, if you don't specify a second argument, it'll start from 2 and it'll go through the end. So his lunch, and now we can take a look at it. So we see it started at 2 and it went through to the end. And you can also specify a second argument, and this is the index to stop at. So splice, we had a number of elements that we wanted to remove. This one's a little different for the second argument. This one is the index of the item you want to stop at. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to bring back our days array that we were working with earlier, and so we can see it all here. And if we wanted to get the weekdays, we'll create a new variable, weekdays, and we're going to say days.slice. So we want to start with Monday, that's at index 1, and we want to grab everything up to Friday. So that's index 2, 3, 4, 5. So here we actually specify the index 1 beyond the one we want to go up to. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'd do 6. And if we look at weekdays, we see we have these weekdays. We can see the days are still unmodified. So that is how you can use the slice method to make a copy of part of an array. Another way we can make copies of arrays is using the concat method. And this one, it's a little different from the previous 2 methods that we looked at, which was the spread operator and the slice method. Concat is used, it's used to make concatenation or joining together multiple arrays. That's usually the purpose of it. So what I'm going to paste in here is 3 arrays. One array is breakfast, has 3 items. Lunch has 2 items, and dinner has 2 items. And if we wanted to combine all of these together, we can do it in this manner. We can say const meals is equal to, so we'll start with breakfast, and we can use the concat method. So this will create a copy of the array, and it will add onto it whatever items we put into it, the arguments. So we can pass in just 1 or even as many as we wanted arguments. So we'll pass in lunch and dinner. And what this will do is it's going to make a copy of this array and then add in also these 2 arrays as copies. So we can hit enter here, and if we look at meals, we can see it has everything, starting with the original breakfast that we had, so eggs, bacon, and coffee. and then the second argument we provided, which was lunch, sandwich and apple, and then the last one, which was dinner, which had steak and potatoes. So we can see them all in that same order. And this is also a new array. So if we look at breakfast, breakfast still has 3 elements in the array. If we look at lunch, still has 2, and dinner still has 2 as well, while our newly created meals array has an entire 7. So this can be useful when you're trying to join together multiple arrays, and which method you use, whether it's the spread operator or the slice method or concat method, will depend on what you are trying to achieve. If you're just trying to create a simple copy, using the spread operator would be the best option. If you're trying to create a copy starting at a specific point and maybe even ending at a specific point, you'd be best using the slice or the slice operator. And if you're trying to combine multiple arrays, using concat would be the best option for you. Important thing to note about all these copying methods that we've discussed, the spread operator, slice, and the concat, is that it makes a shallow copy instead of a deep copy. So for our example, that was actually irrelevant because we're using strings and they aren't impacted by this difference of deep versus shallow copy, but it's more of a problem when you start working with objects, which is frequently what you will be using in an array. So if we imagine we had, let's create a few objects. So we'll create me, which will be a object that'll have the name Michael, and we'll just do that for now. And then we'll create you, which will be similarly an object with a name property, and like this. And so if we wanted to put both of these objects in an array, we can do that easily. So we can say people is equal to me, comma, you. And so if we wanted to make a copy of this, we'll just use the spread operator. So const, we're going to say new people is equal to spread operator people. And we can add to each of these arrays. They'll still be independent. So we can push another object on there. We'll say name is equal to George. So we can see people has 3 elements in it. We can see them all expanded. And the new people will still have 2. So they're independent in this sense, but the copy, when it was created, these objects here, the first 2, are actually referencing the same object. Meaning, if we go and we change something about the first element, so index 0, and we say the name is going to be equal to, we'll capitalize it, Michael. If we actually look at people at index 0, we can see that object also is capitalized now. So this is what it means that it creates a shallow copy, is that it's its own array. When you add items to it or remove from it, it does not modify the original array. But if you have a more complex item in your array, like an object, it will actually still be referencing to the original object. And so that's what it means that it's deep and shallow. So this is also something to be mindful of when you're creating copies. And if this is not expected behavior, you would have to make a deep copy manually of your objects. And there's a few different ways of doing that, but for the scope of this video, I'll just leave it there and leave it up to you to find how you would make a deep copy or a shallow copy versus a shallow copy for objects. These array methods that we discussed for adding elements on with push or unshift, or for removing elements with pop or with unshift, for adding and removing at the same time with splice, for making copies with either the spread operator, with the slice method, or with concat. It can be pretty overwhelming trying to memorize all these at first, and even if you've been doing it for a while, you can still sometimes slip up with what arguments are expected in the even the slice or the splice method. So one resource I would really recommend is MDN for looking these up quickly. So I still reference this nearly every day, even after been doing this for years. So you just go on any search engine and you type in array MDN, and it should be the first result here. You can get to this page here. You can read about everything there is to know about arrays, probably more so than you really need to know, but if you wanted to get really deep and understand all the inner workings of it, you could read through this all. You can see here it talks about what we mentioned, the arrays being shallow instead of deep copies. What I usually do when I get to this page is I just hit Command F, or maybe Windows is going to be some Control F, and I look for the method I want to find. So I want to find slice, found it right here on the side, click on it, and in here you can see there's some examples. This part's very useful too, the syntax. You can do the same for any of the methods here. So we can take a look at splice here. You can see this can take 1, 2, 3, 4 different variations for the arguments. There's some examples. So I would highly recommend that you keep a reference to this, and when you get stuck, to use MDN to look up the methods that you're looking for, just to be sure. And also another trick is to even just do what I was doing in the video. If you're unsure about it, play with it in the console. You can do it on a new tab. You can do it on any page. If you just right click and inspect, go to the console, you can delete anything that's there, clear the console, and you can start experimenting with the methods just the same way that we were doing earlier. So I hope that helps. I hope you're a little bit more comfortable with your understanding of different ways to add, remove items to an array and how to make copies of it, and that you understand the difference, or at least are aware of the difference regarding shallow and deep copies.